All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, VolView Insight, a unified platform for imaging, clinical data, and multimodal AI. My name is Andinet Enquobahrie. I'm a senior director here at Kitware, where I lead the medical computing team. In today's webinar, we will explore how VolView Insight brings medical imaging, electronic health records, and artificial intelligence into one unified platform. I'm joined today by Andrew Howe, an R&D engineer and core developer of VolView Insight. Andrew will show a live demo of VolView Insight and discuss how the platform can be customized for different applications. So before we get started, a couple of logistics here. We will be following up after the webinar with a recording of the session along with the slides. So you'll have everything you need to kind of go back and look at the content and share it with your team. During the webinar, we encourage everyone to submit your questions through the Q&A feature that we have in the platform. Andrew will be looking at it, and obviously I'll be looking at it, and then we can address any questions that come up throughout the webinar. We don't have to wait until the end. Great. So with that, let's dive in. As we wait for folks to settle in, I'll give a brief introduction to Kitware. I think we're very well known in the scientific community with our open source software. We provide software, AI, R&D services to customers in government, industry, and academia in different areas: medical computing, computer vision, scientific visualization, and also high performance software and data solutions. Our team consists of over 200 employees across 6 offices in the United States and Europe. We'll be talking about VolView Insight, which we're very excited about. But in addition to VolView Insight, Kitware develops a wide range of open source platforms. Some of them are very, very well known. For example, CMake, a very widely used build system that simplifies software compilation management. VTK and ParaView are also very well known in the visualization community for building this industry-leading visualization tools. And we do have several other open source tools as well. So what are we going to cover today? And Andrew and I have prepared a lot of good material. First, we'll start introducing VolView Insight, explaining what it is and why it matters. Then we'll look at who are the primary users, target users for the platform. We'll go over how researchers can use it and also product developers. Next, we'll look under the hood at what's the architecture of VolView Insight and also what are the key open source technologies that powers the platform and how it can be extendable. That will be followed by a live demo. Andrew will walk us through a live demo of VolView Insight, and you can see VolView Insight in action. He will then go over what are the different ways of customizing VolView Insight. Obviously, the different types of research need different workflows, and the underlying modules can be customized, reconfigured to be able to empower researchers in different workflows. So Andrew will go over what are the different customization options. And finally, we will wrap up with next steps, right? For example, how can you use a platform? How can you get support? And then and also potentially opportunities for us to collaborate. So, but our goal by the end of this webinar is you have a very good understanding of VolView Insight. Then that can help accelerate your research work in multimodal clinical AI. Just to reiterate before we get started, we will be, especially for folks who just joined, we'll be sending a follow-up email after the webinar with a recording of the session and a copy of the slides. So you'll have everything with you. And then please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A feature, and we will address the question as they come along. First, before we get started, we'd love to hear from you. So we have our first poll question here. The poll question is, what best describes your role or background? I think this will help us in customizing the demonstration. So we've given you 5 choices. One is clinician healthcare provider, researcher academic, AI ML developer, data scientist, student or trainee, and then others. So if you choose other, feel free to share on in the chat what your background is, what your perspective, and we would love to really know about your perspective. So why don't you take a moment to respond to this poll? All right. Thank you for participating in the poll. So I see here close to 50% of our attendees are researchers and come from academia. And we have also close second folks who are AI ML developers and data scientists. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who participated in the poll. All right, so let's get started. What's the motivation behind VolView Insight? Why do we need another open source platform? Again, folks who work in multimodal data analysis knows there are tools that are developed with imaging focus, and there are tools that are developed with EHR data focus. So there's a lot of fragmentation and over complexity of tools available if you're trying to use both imaging and EHR data in your research. And second, there's a need for very fast, web-based intuitive applications when you're involved in this type of project. And the third one is having this unified platform based on our experience and collaborative research. And what we heard from our customers is having this unified platform, bringing together real-time imaging, having access to the EHR FHIR resources, and then having a multimodal AI inference within a unified platform would really, really unlock new opportunities. It makes prototyping of new algorithms easier because you get to see the data within the platform, you get to run your inference, you get to see the results together. So this type of unified platform would make faster prototyping of products or even clinical research work a lot easier. Next, we have our second poll question. So if you could respond to this poll, we would really appreciate it. The question is, what's your biggest challenge working with current imaging and EHR workflows? And then we're going to give you 5 choices. The first one is too many disconnected systems and tools. The second one is lack of AI integration in clinical tools. Third is difficulty really accessing structured EHR data. And then the fourth one is limited support for custom research workflows. So why don't you take a moment to respond to this poll question? So what are the biggest challenge working in imaging plus EHR workflows? We'll wait a few seconds until people respond, and then and we'll look at the result. All right, thank you. So here I see the highest, more than 36% say lack of, there's a limited support for custom research workflow, right? And that definitely makes sense. That's why we built VolView Insight. And the second most response here was too many disconnected systems and tools. And then that's really fits with what our finding and understanding is. A lot of the tools available are disconnected. All right, great. Thank you for participating in that poll. All right, so what's VolView Insight? So VolView Insight, at its core, it's a web-based platform, right? That brings together imaging, EHR data and AI into a unified application. First, it integrates directly with PACS system using the standard DICOM web protocol. So whether you're using the open source DICOM server or Tank, and that's what we will be showing, that's what Andrew will be demonstrating today, or any other cloud services like Amazon AWS Health Imaging DICOM store, you can directly connect your imaging studies into the workflow instantly. So you have that DICOM web interface. Second, it can connect to any EHR system via the FHIR protocol, which creates this standard protocol for being able to transmit structured patient data. And in our case, in the demonstration that we'll show today, we'll be using an open source server called Happy FHIR that is a FHIR server with EHR data that we'll be directly communicating with from VolView Insight. But you can also use other types of FHIR servers like AWS Health Lake and others that are provided by other public cloud service companies. Third, VolView Insight enables multimodal visualization. So you can visualize your radiological imaging data, you can visualize your clinical data, and we will demonstrate this. And these are all done in one platform, so you'll have a very complete view of the patient's clinical history. Fourth, it supports real-time AI inference, and we're going to demonstrate this in two ways. One is you can run a medical imaging MONAI-based AI model on the imaging data and get the response and the result and be able to overlay it within the system. Or you can also run a multimodal AI inference system like MedGeMMA, which is released by Google, that can be run within VolView Insight. So it has this AI inference mechanism to be able to process your imaging data or your EHI data. Finally, it's meant for rapid prototyping and deployment. And as I'll talk about in a minute, it uses widely available open source tools under the hood. So it makes it very flexible tool for researchers and clinical innovators who are interested in a custom workflow or even a product that they can build on top of VolView Insight. With the key differentiators in our view would be, one, it's a browser based, so you don't need any installation. But also, I'll show a quick demo. It has this GPU accelerated visualization feature, so you'll be able to generate very high quality renderings of the imaging data and also be able to access different servers. It's a plug-in ready system, which means you don't have to use the AI models that come with VolView Insight out of the box, but you can bring in your AI models into VolView Insight as long as you follow some of the standard formats, and we'll go over that. Third, it has this unified data layer. It's unifying imaging data, FHIR data, and also any derivatives from this raw data. Like, for example, you have an imaging data that you've run segmentation. The segmentation mask will be an overlay that you can see within VolView Insight. And it's extensible. So you can extend the viewer, you can extend the AI pipeline, and you can extend it to other type of DICOM servers or FHIR servers. And this will be a very important part of it, is because it's modularized and extendable. It can be used to run different types of custom clinical workflows. So there are two primary target users for VolView Insight. First is obviously researchers, right? Researchers that are working on building new algorithms for multimodal AI. They will be able to load their data, run their algorithm, and then evaluate the result within the same platform, right? And then the second one is product developers. AI software as a medical device development companies that will be distributing AI pipelines. They can use VolView Insight to be able to have this front end with visualization of the imaging data and also visualization of the clinical data, but also being able to connect with external FHIR and DICOM servers and run AI algorithms and display all the results. So you can use it to build your own products as well by customizing the relevant modules that are specific to the clinical problem that you're working on. So clinical researchers and product developers are the two primary target users of VolView Insight. Next, I'll quickly go over the technologies and architecture, and then we'll get into some of the fun stuff with the live demo of VolView Insight. First, let's look at the key technology. So VolView Insight, basically, as you can tell from the name, it's based on VolView, and VolView is this open source web-based visualization software that Kitware have been developing for the last several years, which is based on ITK and VTK. ITK is the Insight Toolkit for segmentation and registration of medical images. So we do have now a JavaScript version of ITK, and then VTK.js is a JavaScript library for visualization of imaging data. So VolView is developed on top of VTK.js and ITK.js mainly. One of the key differentiator of VolView versus other types of visualization software is it's very powerful interactive in-browser rendering of cinematic rendering of the medical images. It has all the standard radiological views and measures. You can drag and drop the DICOM data visualization. As I mentioned, it has a very high quality, high fidelity 3D cinematic volume rendering, and it's open source. It's open source, and we actually do have a version that we're hosting, and I'll just switch quickly to that one. We're here at volview.kitware.app, so you'll be able to see it. There are some sample data that we've provided that you can use to interact with it. So and I definitely encourage everyone to try it out. So it has all the technologies and controls that you expect from a radiological workstation. And as you see here, the rendering has several options, including cinematic rendering, and you can try that out. It's open source, and you'll be able to see. And it has the other features and functionality that you expect from a radiological viewer. So I'll just quickly demonstrate a couple of those. So if you have these coronal projections of a CT scan, yeah, I mean you could do all sorts of ROI annotation, and you can have polygonal annotation as well.
Andinet, a question came in,
Sure.
and it's asking, how is VolView different from OHIF?
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So OHIF and VolView are similar libraries. They're both open source libraries. I would say VTK. I know OHIF also uses VTK.js under the hood, so it has a lot of 3D rendering aspect as well. What makes VolView different is so the cinematic rendering aspect. So some of our users and collaborators are interested in high quality cinematic rendering aspect. Again, that could also be added in OHIF. I'm not sure if it's available in there. So that's one aspect. And then the second aspect is, as we will demonstrate, you'll be able to connect with, be able to customize it and bring in different types of data. And like, for example, the EHR data connection that we will show today is one aspect of that. So that's another differentiator of VolView. But they're both very similar. And they are equally capable. And as you can see, the front ends are clinical grade, very well taught, and can be used as a radiological workstation.
And a follow-up
Yes,
question came in
sure.
asking whether VolView can be connected to XNAT, similar to OHIF. And if you don't know what XNAT is, it's an open source imaging informatics software platform.
Yes. So currently, VolView, we don't have that connection with XNet, but we do have a connection with another data management system called Girder. Girder is kind of similar to XNet. It's an open source data management system. So that's what we have right now. We do have that connection with Girder. But again, if there is an interest in connecting VolView with XNet, that's something we could help, we can collaborate on. Any other questions, Andrew?
Nope.
All right, thank you. Yeah, those were great questions. Please keep them coming. Thank you.
Okay,
All right.
another question actually came
Sure.
in. Does VolView run entirely on the client side, and how is data security handled?
Good. So yeah, VolView runs entirely on the client side. So in many ways, all the 3D rendering you're doing, it's done in browser on the client side. So you can, when you launch VolView app, what it does is the data stays on your machine. You can drag and drop it. All the rendering, everything happens on your workstation. So everything stays within your workstation. Now, having said that, if you have a data set, a DICOM data that is stored in a secured storage, let's say on the cloud or S3 buckets or any other workstation, as long as you are able to securely transfer the data into the client side, then you will be good, right? So you still, the data transferred, all the rendering happens on the client side. Now we do have another platform called TRAME, TRAME, where it provides client server side rendering, where in some cases, if for example, your input data is very, very big, very large, and then having the 3D rendering in browser on your workstation, if that becomes really, resource intensive, then you can also think about using TRAM for doing server-side rendering. So you do all the rendering on the server side and then transfer rendered frames into the client side. So we do have those options, the same that you could be completely do all the rendering on the client side, or you could do the rendering on the back end. But VolView was designed to mainly have the rendering on the rendering on the client side.
And Annette, there's a fourth question. I'm
Sure.
wondering, do you okay? It's how do we assure the clinicians in hospital IT that VolView Insight would be safe for patient data? Does it have a HIPAA or SO2 compliance certification?
So yeah, that's a good question. So in terms of HIPAA compliance, again, this involves a lot of conversation with the IT. So there are a couple of things to bring up, right? One is if the web app, this system is, if it's hosted within a secured server, and then you have an additional security controls. Obviously, you want to have credentials and authorizations, user access management, all right, on top of VolView. And then when you're communicating, interacting with your DICOM storage, if all that is secured, then that would satisfy one of the requirements of HIPAA compliance, right? But HIPAA compliance has other additional requirements, right? For example, physical storage. The data that you're storing has to be physically secured. There are additional processes and procedures that you'll have to satisfy to be HIPAA compliant. So In our case, VolView is open source, right? So we don't have all those processes in place, but anybody can take VolView and add those additional processes and procedures in place and be able to establish a full HIPAA compliance. So that's what I would suggest is talking to them, kind of clearly conveying to them what VolView does, and then working with the IT team to add those additional security measures that are needed to be fully HIPAA compliant.
There's another question, Andinet.
Sure.
Do you,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So the question is, what stops startups or companies from using VolView as their SaaS-based platform for their software as a medical device product?
Nothing stops them, because VolView, as I said, it's all open source. You can use it, but then, as you know, taking a platform and turning it into all the way to a product, there are additional steps that are needed, right? Obviously, you'll have to do more verification and validation, and then also depending on how you use VolView for what intended use, right? If you're using VolView for patient care, then you'll have to go through regulatory process as well. So, there's, I think nobody can, anybody can use VolView, build a whole product around it and use it. It's free. It has Apache license, which means it can be used for business applications as well. All right. Okay. So I think I'll go a little bit faster, so we have a lot of time for Andrew to give us a demo of VolView Insight. Again, this goes back to what I was saying. We wanted to talk a little bit about the tools that we are using under VolView Insight. So we're using ORTank. ORTank is a lightweight open source DICOM server. It has implementation of DICOM web REST API, so you can use it for storing, retrieving, and querying imaging data. And it's very extendable. So you can have a plugin that connects to AWS or GCP, and you'll be able to get the data. So we're using ORTank as a demonstration, but you could use also other DICOM servers as well. The other one we want to point out is Happy FHIR. So this is an open source FHIR server. So it exposes all the REST API and Smart on FHIR APIs, and Andrew will talk about that, where you have all the structured resources for patients, encounters, and observations. And you can deploy it on the premise or on the cloud. And in our case, we deployed it within our clusters at Kitware. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll be using Happy FHIR as an example of an EHR system that you can use to store your EHR data and then be able to retrieve your EHR data. In terms of the AI algorithms, as I mentioned, the system is set up so that you'll be able to be bringing your own AI model. But in our case, we will be demonstrating two AI platforms. One is MONAI. As folks working in the medical imaging, as you all know, MONAI has become a standard open source PyTorch-based deep learning imaging framework. So you can use MONAI to build an end-to-end training and inference pipelines. As you finish your training and you have your model ready, then you can bring it into VolView Insight. And again, this is 100% open source, and you can use it both for clinical research, but also for product development. The second model we'll be demonstrating is MedGeMMA. MedGeMMA is released by Google. It's a multimodal foundation model. It understands both imaging and clinical text. So that's why we integrated with VolView Insight, because it has this aspect of being able to analyze imaging and clinical data. It can handle CT, MRI, ultrasound, and X-ray. And it's also you can fine tune it. So that's a big thing about it, is using that foundation model, you can fine tune it for your particular data set And then you can bring it into VolView Insight to be able to use it on your backend server. So these are example AI pipelines that we've integrated with VolView Insight, but VolView Insight is customizable. You'll be able to bring other types of AI models.
Yeah, and a question just
Yes.
came in about that, so I don't know if you need to answer it, but it was, are
Sure.
Momonai and MedGeMMA the only supported models, or can we bring pre-trained models in, such as maybe a proprietary model?
Yes, you can bring in your own model as well, because the backend server is customizable, and yeah, and that was the most important thing when we designed VolView Insight. Is we don't want to have only specific types of models, but rather any types of models people developed, they can bring it in. Again, the models could be proprietary, and then obviously your VolView Insight instance would be running on your own server, so those proprietary AI models could be used as well. All right. So real quick, let me talk about the architecture. So again, in the middle you have the VolView Insight, the unified clinical workspace. So that's where all the imaging, clinical data, and AI inference come together. And this will be talking to a DICOM image source, right? And the communication will be through DICOM web. So REST API protocol that you can follow to securely stream your DICOM image data into VolView Insight. On the clinical side, you'll have VolView connected to your EHR system. This could be Epic or Cerner. And obviously, you need to have the right credentials and authorization to be able to talk to them. And it will then talk to VolView Insight will talk to this server using HL7 FHIR protocol, and this will be again RESTful FHIR APIs that will send the data from the FHIR server into the unified into the unified VolView Insight. And then on the other end, you have your AI backend. And this AI backend can be running PyTorch-based inference servers, models as we just talked about, Monai or MedGeMMA. And the communication will be through a remote procedural call, WebSocket communication. So just to explain a little bit more about the architecture, you have now the front end, which is a pure browser, right? Web browser. You don't need any installation. You have your back end, which is a Python inference service where you can plug in different models, and then your data source will be connected using DICOM web with a DICOM server, and the REST API with a FHIR server, and then you can deploy it either on-prem or the cloud on the hybrid. For example, your unified VolView Insight can be running on your server internally, but your DICOM server could be on AWS, and then you'll be able to connect credential with all the right credentials, be able to get the data and be able to visualize. So it allows you to have this hybrid deployment as well. All right. So before we switch to Andrew, let's have one more question here, a poll question, which is, how familiar are you with multimodal AI? For example, we just talked about MedGeMMA and as one example of a multimodal AI. So just want to get a sense of people's experience in multimodal AI. So let's go ahead and run the poll here. So we've given you 4 options here: very familiar, somewhat familiar, not very familiar, and not familiar at all. So why don't you take a couple seconds to respond to this poll? All right. So I see, yeah. So I see a lot more. The majority of folks are very familiar with multimodal models, which is great. I think the demo Andrew is going to be showing will demonstrate that, followed by people with some familiarity with multimodal AI. All right. With that, I'll hand it over to Andrew. I'll
Okay.
stop sharing.
So today I'm going to be demoing VolView Insight, and just a second. And so I'll also be showing the technologies that we're using. I'll be showing the FHIR server as well as the Orthanc server. And right now, we're not connected to anything. So there's no image shown, and you can see that there's no data here to show things like the heart rate and whatnot. But I'm going to show you what happens when that connection is made. So let me actually switch us over to the FHIR. I want to show that. Okay, so this here is a simple web interface for interacting with FHIR, which is an implementation of the FHIR specification. So if you're unfamiliar with FHIR, it's fast healthcare interoperability resources, and it's basically just a collection of data classes. And these sort of look like they're developer oriented terms like observation, patient, but these are actually defined in legal documents now, or there's a mention of the FHIR specification in the 21st Century Cures Act, and this is, you can find this online on the there's a HL7 FHIR website where you can see exactly what is the definition of an observation or a patient. So you can think of this interface here as an interface to an EHR system. So Epic or Cerner would be exposing the data in the EHR through these FHIR resources. And the reason I'm using FHIR here is because, again, it's very developer friendly. It's easy to iterate on. If you are a research group trying to test a clinical deployment, but and again, with a fast iteration, you might want to use something like FHIR. But if you're in a clinical context connecting with a real live EHR, such as FHIR or Cerner, such as Epic or Cerner, you would then be connecting to those, but still communicating via the same underlying resources. So I'm just going to show you an example here. This is, again, it looks very sort of developer facing, but it is actually showing the data here. So you can see this is a routine vital sign. It's a non-invasive blood pressure systolic. So an observation, you can think of that like a measurement, and there's different ways of, I can list the patients here. And so if I list this patient, for instance, you can see that this patient is a female. It's the birth date here, which is, it's time adjusted because this is anonymized, as this is coming from the MIMIC data set, which is a data set of a public data set of actual patient records. So they've anonymized it. But anyway, so I just want to show here that this is a FHIR server that we're running, but you can substitute this with an EHR system, or even there's even some provide, like AWS has Health Lake, for instance, which has a similar implementation here. And this can be run on the cloud, or it can be run locally. In this case, it's being run locally on our intranet. So we have a server that's running on our own intranet, and right now I'm just interfacing with that server. Now I'm going to show a different. I'm going to show the Orthanc real quick. Okay. So before I show VolView Insight, I also want to show quickly like what's going on with Orthanc. So if you're unfamiliar, Orthanc is a PACS, or picture archiving communication system, and it basically just stores the imaging data. And some EHR systems might have a proprietary PACS system, like maybe I think Epic has their own, or Cerner has their own. Sometimes you might use a third party. So AWS has a PACS system. I think General Electric makes one. But otherwise, the main point is that you have all of the imaging data usually stored separately, because there's this DICOM format, and DICOM is another standardized system. It's sort of like FHIR, but it's for imaging data, where there is a set of codes that define the data. And so here right now, we've turned off security features. That's why it says insecure setup here, but that's just for the demo. By default, actually, you can implement these security features, which would make it much more appealing for situations in which you actually want to acquire HIPAA compliant certificates. So here I'm just showing all the studies. And again, if you're unfamiliar with DICOM, these are all these attributes and tags here are things that are defined in DICOM, the DICOM standards. So things like study ID. If I click on this particular one, it's a chest X-ray, and you can see all these tags. So this is not a bunch of idiosyncratic stuff. This is actually well defined in the DICOM specifications. So things like these are tags that are associated with the image. It's metadata. And I think I can preview the image in the DICOM server, but it doesn't look so good. Yeah, it's just a huge depiction of the image. But anyway, so we have this Orthanc server. It's also running on our local intranet. And you can run this Orthanc, you can run a PACS in a locked down setting or you can run it in the cloud and you can have a connection to a PACS located on a different machine. And now I want to show VolView Insight. So you can basically think of VolView Insight as the physician or researcher facing glue that takes in the images from the PACS and it takes the EHR data and it mimics a clinical deployment. By mimics, I mean it actually implements the constraints that that you would have to face if you're creating an app that's intended to work with an EHR. Because in a lot of cases, you might have some machine learning people that are just taking in a bunch of structured data, like huge CSV files, or maybe it's some compressed version of that, and they're training their models and they're fine tuning them. But you can't actually take that model and just deploy it. You need to have a more restrictive environment that implements the protocols through which the data are ingested from the EHR and the PACS system. And we create that in VolView Insight, and we also have an endpoint for you to insert your model. And I'm going to show that in just a minute. So when I click connect here, what it does is it lists the patients, and these are all the patients from the FHIR server that have a corresponding image in the PACS system. We just loaded 10 patients to keep it simple. And when I click on a patient, if there's enough data, it will show a chart here, but it doesn't always show a chart if there's not enough data. So for instance, like for the average arterial pressure, there's no data, there's not a graph here, but that's because this is just showing what was available. And this little view here could be substituted with the sort of things you would be interested in. Maybe you might be interested in seeing a physician note, or you might be interested in seeing a recent diagnosis. Here we're just showing the heart rate, respiratory, basically just the vitals, because it was a simple thing that could demonstrate that we have a connection with the EHR. And basically what we're doing is we're querying the FHIR server for the resources, and then we're digesting those resources, we're pulling out the data, and we're displaying it here. And because VolView Insight is an extension of VolView.
Andrew, a question came in. Is the mapping between the patient IDs in the EHR and PACS done automatically?
Yes. So there is a way that you can identify the patient. There's a way that you can identify a patient through a tag in the DICOM data, as well as there is an identifier for the patient resource. And when the connection is made between the two different data sources, the IDs must be unique. But once that matching is made, the data is you're basically now focused on a single patient through the patient ID.
Just to chime on that, yes, that's set up the configuration we have. But if your clinical workflow requires, I just want to have all the patients with all the images, it doesn't matter whether they have a corresponding EHR data. Yeah, you can also implement that logic as well, right? So the current configuration we have, the logic requires to have matching, right, between patient ID between the imaging and EHR data.
Yep. And so now what I have here is I have an image showing, and this image is pulled directly from the PACS, which again could be, you could have the PACS storing the imaging data somewhere completely different than the EHR, or it could all be local on machine if you have like a huge security setup. So nonetheless, we're displaying the data, or I can change the image, and these are all the imaging studies associated with the patient I've selected, whose name is listed as anonymous because the data has been anonymized. But and with this, you can leverage the features in VolView, so you can like scribble on it, you can do things like draw polygons. But I'm not going to show that here because Andinet already showed a lot of the VolView's capabilities. So now what I'm going to show is that if you set up a connection with the so basically what I just did there was I connected to the Python backend. So you can put in the different locations of the servers, and what I've done here is I set up a connection with the Python backend, and it's all running locally right now. But with this connection, I can actually send the data, both the imaging and the FHIR data, or I can just send the imaging data or just the FHIR data. We're just going to show a quick example of all three. So when I click perform analysis here, what happens is the data from the app is sent over a secured WebSocket connection to the Python backend, and then the Python backend is running a model. This model can be arbitrarily sophisticated because once you have the full power of the Python ecosystem, you can plug in PyTorch checkpoint weights, which can be a fine-tuned multimodal model, or it can just be a simple statistical analysis. In this case, data is sent from VolView Insight to the backend for this simple statistical analysis. And now I want to show a lung segmentation. So this is an imaging model, and it was developed in-house. It's really just to show the capabilities here. It's probably not going to do the best job. Yeah, you can see there's some artifacts here, but the main point, and what it's trying to do is it's trying to say it's an AI model that's basically trying to say where are the lungs in this image. And you can think of, maybe you're trying to, there's many different scenarios in which you might want to use a model like this, but you could be using this to test a clinical deployment where you actually want to see whether your model is useful for researchers or clinicians. You could have it as a way for clinicians to have assisted, they could be assisted by these models for decision making, and you can even use it maybe for labeling, because you might want to have a system in place where you're testing your model and you want to label the data, whether it's, whether this got the segmentation right or wrong. In any case, the last thing I want to show is the multimodal data. So I'm just going to flip over to this image because it's cleared. So what we've done is we've actually integrated our app with MedGeMMA. So MedGeMMA is a multimodal large language model that can ingest both imaging and patient data. It was released by Google DeepMind, as Andinet said, and basically it was trained on FHIR resources and as well as imaging data to try and come up with clinical findings. And because it's fine-tuned on this kind of data, it's not really the same if you just had a ChatGPT window open. And the reason we implemented it here, though, is because these sorts of models have become really useful, and especially in recent years. I can't think of anyone who doesn't just have a ChatGPT window open or a Gemini window open and they're asking questions. But in this case, what we're doing is we're testing out a fine-tuned model on healthcare data, and it's actually given the context with all of the proper constraints that a clinical system has. For instance, I can't just drag and drop my clinical data to ChatGPT because I would have to export the FHIR resources, and there's probably already a lot of security issues with that. But it's also really difficult and unwieldy. So what we have here is we have a system where we take in the FHIR resources, which represent the constraints of connecting with an EHR, and we send it to the backend. So I'm going to ask it a simple question like, what do you see in this image? And it's going to send the query along with the data to MedGeMMA, and we're going to get a response that's completely unique. This is a live demo, and these models are sometimes non-deterministic. But you can think of, okay, so let's see, it says the image shows a normal chest x-ray, the heart size is within normal limits, the lungs are clear bilaterally, etc. And so, again, you might have a proprietary in-house model. You might be wanting to train a model to do something very specific, like you want your language model just to be, maybe you want your language model to be used by non-medical people, where the non-medical people or the machine learning people can ask questions because they don't really know about anatomy or physiology. And this doesn't have to be a chest X-ray. This can be an MRI. This can be any sort of imaging data.
Yeah, Andrew, a couple more questions came in. So let me try to. So there was a question: is it possible to edit the mask? Yes, I think I responded to that. VolView has editors, paint brushes to edit that. Another question is there an example multimodal dataset provided with VolView that has local EHR and local images? You mentioned Mimic, but I'm not sure if the images are provide. Yes. So
Yes.
you have to, again, you can go ahead, Andrew, and share how we got the approval. And
Yeah. So in this case, we're using Mimic, which is it's pretty much an open standard for EHR data. And what the Mimic data set is it's a data set that was compiled by, I think, some researcher at Harvard, where he
right.
took a bunch of imaging data from a hospital system, as well as all their EHR records. He conglomerated. He composed it into one giant data set, anonymized it all, and then published it. To get access, you do need to do a pretty simple you do need to do a pretty simple certification program, but it's pretty quick. And once you have it, you have access to this data. It is matched. So there's the chest x-rays, which are matched with the EHR data. That's why we have this example here, which is an example from Mimic. And
and I was gonna add, that was good, Andrew. I was gonna add, Mimic has now chest X-ray images as well, Paul. In addition to the EHR clinical data, they've actually have X-ray image that you can also have access to. So so that's why we use Mimic, because it gathers both the EHR clinical data, but also the imaging data.
Yep.
Maybe one more minute for another question. How do you select type of data to be passed to the language model?
Good question. So we don't actually expose a physician or a researcher facing buttons to do that. That's actually implemented in the app. So you would need a developer to do that. But basically, all that you would need to do is you would need to change the resources that you're asking for from the FHIR server, and then package those together and send it to the backend. So right now, by default, we send both the image and we send some of the vitals. I think I can ask you a question about the vitals. What do you notice about the vital signs? And so we've just programmed it to send the vitals and the image, but yeah, you can certainly change that to be a physician note, or you can change it to be a recent diagnosis. And you might think that would be especially useful when you have these niche situations where you might have a specific type of practice, like a cardiology practice, or a specific research, like cardiology, like people who are doing research in cardiology, and they want to send this very specific data. So let's see, the patient's vital signs are stable. Heart rate was slightly elevated at 94. So yeah, so I mean, it sends the vitals and the image, but that can be swapped out. Oxygen saturation. Yeah.
Great. Cool. So Andrew, can you talk about next, just in the interest of time, we got about 5 minutes, how to customize VolView Insight?
Yep. Let me change my tab. So there were a few things I want to show, but in the interest of time, I'm just gonna okay. So leaving where Andinet left off, continuing where he left off, we have another poll question. So the poll question is, how do you see yourself using a platform like VolView Insight? And the options are A, for an AI model, prototyping and testing, or another option is as part of a clinical workflow and product development. Another option is for research and academic projects. And another option is to evaluate or benchmark multimodal AI models. And then you could just exploring, not sure yet, is another option. Yeah, and Andinet, if you could narrate the poll results. I'm currently just on the presentation tab.
Yeah. So yes, the majority, 64%, say they would use VolView Insight for AI model prototyping and testing. So that's the majority.
Yep. Okay. So anyway, I just really quickly want to go over the customization again, because this is one of the interesting parts. This part might be the most interesting for certain people. So there's many ways you can customize VolView Insight to be the right tool for your context. So for one, we inherit we inherited and continued with the distributed architecture of VolView, so you can deploy any of the servers, whether it be the DICOM server or the FHIR server or the Python machine learning AI backend on the cloud or locally. So it opens up opportunities for scaling the backend as needed based on the size of your model, and you could take advantage of cloud providers that offer different resource plans. Additionally, you can customize the way that the EHR transfers to the viewer, just as somebody asked. VolView Insight, we use views. If you're not familiar with web dev, don't worry about it, but basically we use views composition API, and that allows us to organize each component's logic. So that means that you can easily create and reuse custom composable functions that allow you to process and display any sort of EHR data exactly how your workflow requires. And so this can be lab results, physician notes, allergies, etc. So yeah, the purpose of the viewer is for a researcher or physician to interact and observe the patient as a whole. So while doing this, VolView Insight provides the opportunity to package and send data to the backend. And in our case, we've done a segmentation model, which is image only, the database model, which was just the EHR data, and then we have that multimodal model. And the difference between running these models from VolView Insight's front end and on in-house data, and like maybe you want to run it on an in-house data corpus. So VolView Insight implements the industry standard environment for a clinical application. So meaning the protocols that we use to transmit the data are all in large part implemented in major EHR vendors. And lastly, as implied earlier, we support multiple AI frameworks such as ONCS and MONAI. And so you can think of ONCS as like a universal file format. So it allows your team to build a model in any tool they want, such as PyTorch or TensorFlow, and you can save it as a special file type in your, and you can also, there's also MONAI, which is an industry standard toolbox for building medical AI models. And it provides a specialized code for handling 3D scans and performing complex tasks like segmentation. And just to zoom in on these particular customization options, so you can customize the EHR data source. So in our case, we used FHIR, but given the large degree of standardization around the messaging protocol and the authorization framework, we didn't really talk too much about this, but Smart on FHIR is sort of like OAuth 2. It's an authorization framework that allows a physician or a patient to authorize access to the data. I'm not going to get too much into that, but if you're familiar with OAuth, it's a lot like that. And so with Smart on FHIR, our front end has the ability to plug into these different data sources. Another source of customization would be the DICOM server or the imaging source. So we use Orthanc, but there's other PACS systems. And then we've even been exploring video. This is something that we're doing on, offline, but we're exploring different sorts of data sources for the viewer. And this is a way that you can customize it. Another way that you can customize it is the back end. So it's completely open-ended. We use the different models that we showed, the simple statistical model. We used an image model. We use MedGeMMA. But you can think with all the current advances in AI, the back end will have a lot of interesting variety in customization. So you can, Google DeepMind releases EHR and image-focused models on a regular basis. MedGeMMA was released just a few months ago, and we thought, well, hey, what a great idea would it be to add this functionality into VolView Insight, and we provide that medium through which you can actually query these models. And some companies are competing, some companies are developing their own in-house models, and GPT-5 recently was, there's a lot of people saying GPT-5 could be great for that, and there's some people on the other side of the argument, but either way, there's a lot of AI R&D going on right now. And people are trying to advance the standard of care through these models. And lastly, just as a final icing on the cake, the user interface itself, this pretty app that we have is highly customizable. So we use Vue.js, and it has access to the entire JavaScript ecosystem. So it can be very user friendly and powerful, even though even though it's an app run in the web browser, I just want to clarify, these apps don't need to be served over the internet. They can be completely in-house and locally hosted, or hosted over an intranet. So we have these other Vue apps written at Kitware, and we also have Dive here, which was written in Vue.js. And another thing you get off the bat with these web apps is that any device that implements a web browser, such as a tablet or a phone, can automatically display it as well. So I don't know why you would want to do this, but if you wanted to use VolView on your phone, just off the bat, it works because it's, it's Vue.js is meant to be composable and displayable on multiple aspect ratios. And so the user interface might have a lot of, customization, a lot of customization interest. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, next steps is you can, there's no, right now there's no hosted demo, so you can't access the demo like VolView, and you can't use, so for instance, you can look at VolView if you go on volview.kitware.app. We're not hosting a demo of VolView Insight where online, but you can build it and you can clone the repo and build it yourself. So if you're really interested, or if you want to play around and see if this would be useful for you, we encourage you to clone and build the repo and then start the Python inference server, maybe plug in your own models. And if there's any sort of assistance you want with building, packaging, or deployments, whether on-prem or on the cloud, or if you want to add features, branding, change the, you want us to help with certain sorts of AI model, plugging your own proprietary AI models, Kitware can help with that via the contact link below. And so that brings us to the QA portion. You want to take over from here?
Yeah, absolutely. That was great. I was answering a lot of questions that came into the Q&A. As Andrew mentioned, if you need any help with customizing VolView Insight, building it up, and then managing it, yeah, let us know. We can help. It's completely open source. You'll be able to find it on the GitHub repo. So that you'll be able to. So we do, I know we're kind of running out of time here, but we do have a couple more minutes for if there are any additional questions. So we'll wait to see if people have any questions. So there's a question that came in. Is any part of the pipeline you showed FDA approved for clinical use? No. So everything that we showed today, it's not FDA approved, but as we mentioned a little bit earlier, you can use this platform to build your application, and you have to go through verification and validation process to get FDA approval. If that's something that you're interested, we'll be able to help you as well. So we do have, just quickly to share my screen here. No, there we go. Yeah, here we go. So yeah, so there is this. I know there was a question that came in asking if Kitware can assist in customizing and also deployment. Yes, we'll be able to help with that. So if you can scan this QR code, this will take you to kitware.com/contact, and if you fill out that form, we'll be able to assist you. And also, before I forget, we're going to be sending a survey at the end of the webinar, and we would really appreciate it if you can respond to the survey in such a way that, just want to make sure some of these webinars we're organizing are useful to the audience. All right, are there any other questions? I think we've answered. Okay. Thank you. I think we've gotten all the questions, right? Andrew, is there anything we've... oh, there was one. What's the requirement for the return mask coming from the AI models? So that's basically a binary mask, right, Andrew? Like when we run the lung segmentation inference, once the segmentation is done, then it generates a binary image, and that gets sent to VolView Insight, and again, it gets overlaid. That's how it's visualized.
Yep, that's correct.
Right. Any other questions? All right. Well, again, if you have more questions and want to explore collaborations, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and thank you for joining, and we hope to see you again in another webinar. Thank you.